Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kirsch.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
All right. I admit it. I am jealous of the skateboards behind your head. They look so effing cool. But I have nothing but coffee cups.
All right. Who are you, Matthew McConaughey?
He's a good boy from Missouri, just like me.
Yeah. Oh, is he? Really? Is that as southern as he is?
Him and Brad Pitt.
Oh, well, great. Lovely people. Did they ever write a book? Otherwise, I'm not interested.
Well, I shall have to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head. But enough about our kind of love fest here for skateboards and Matthew McConaughey and Brad Pitt. Who's on the show?
So today we have Alison Jones on the show, and her book, This Book Means Business, which is all about how to actually write a business book. And it's quite relevant and amazing to have her because she is not only owns a publishing company, but she, maybe until yesterday, was the head judge of the Business Book Awards. And it was very relevant for us being close to our 50th episodes, or at the time we're bringing this live, post 50th episodes, which means we've been through a year of reading a book a week and figuring out what's actually out there and why we're doing this and why are people writing these things and can we learn anything from it. So it was a pretty special episode and we had some great conversations. However, what were your takeaways?
Well, one of my favorite parts of the whole thing was, with so many great business books out there, why aren't more people doing something with all of this knowledge? So I'm really looking forward to kind of, listening to that part again. I think she had some really interesting insights, and one of which was there are people that are doing things, but maybe we're just not hearing about them. My takeaways were, as a business leader, even as a team member, establishing a 5-6 minutes a day writing practice will overall be good for you because it'll just help you clarify ideas and communicate them more effectively and more efficiently. And the other one was, once you looked at setting up the book, deciding the title, the table of contents, building the community, all of that was very much product like. How are you going to build a product that the market actually wants? So instead of kind of saying, I've got an idea, who wants it? It's actually doing the research up front and finding out who's my community, what do they want, and how can I satisfy their need? And that resonates with both of us, I'm sure. But those are my takeaways. What about you?
Yeah, so I have, I think, two things. So one was that, yes, the writing for leaders, I would say, in the design community for a long time or over 10 years ago, everyone's talking about being a storyteller and you create better things when you're a storyteller. And I would now, being in change and transformation, I would say being able to, if you have a habit of writing or putting things on paper and clarifying it in your head, the clarity you're going to probably get in your communication to the rest of the organization as a leader is absolutely valuable. I don't think I've been to a single project where an organization tried to change and engage everyone who worked in there, often hundreds or not thousands of people, to go, hey, we want to go this way. It's going to be better. Let's go there. In most cases, leaders did not have the clarity or the engaged empathy in terms of emotionally engaging people with their communication. And I think if you're right, you're gonna improve your storytelling skills. And if you improve your storytelling skills, you're gonna be a better leader. As simple as that, which is a massive value, right?
I've got a question though. I do journaling, which is actually in a moleskin notebook with a pen, and I journal for 1 page, maybe 2 pages every day. And I think that it slows my brain down and it uses a different part of my physiology to actually write actually in a book, as opposed to thoughts to keyboard or thoughts to voice recording. Do you think it's different in how you write?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm somewhere between, as you know me, I work a lot with post-it. So I try to be a bit more visual and then having like lots of different bits and pieces on a post-it and putting them all up and putting them in order is one thing that helps me greatly to structure my thoughts. And the other thing is then the other extreme, so to speak, I guess, is I sit with Grammarly and it just type stuff in. So I try to do a 300 word thing, maybe a day or maybe two, three a week. That sort of as well explore a thought, an observation, or something that happened, and expressing it, and then going out, putting it out, and asking, and whatever. The different
Good.
things. Some are a bit more for me, and others are a bit more for the things I put out there, I guess.
Did you have a second insight? Because I think I interrupted you halfway through your first one.
Yes, you did, and yes, I do. So the second one was, and I think that is going along a lot with, I worked a lot in innovation, and you're often coming up with ideas that are ahead of the curve. So our friend Joe Pine put out a book back in 1999, The Experience Economy, and we were lucky to have him on one of our first episodes. And back in the days, it wasn't an idea that was really flying, And as Alison said, oh, maybe if the idea doesn't fly, maybe you shouldn't write the book. And I said, well, Joe is doing amazing well now that he re-released the book 2 years ago. So it took him nearly 20 years or 18 years for this book to become more relevant. However, he wrote it back then anyways, and I find that a really good approach as well to say, look, if you believe in an idea, you can phrase it, tell the story. It's worth putting it out there. So at the same time as you say, well, check the market, do that in order to have a particular effect. You might also argue to say, well, a good book to write is if you believe in your idea, you want to go out there, want to be ahead of the curve, and want to be the first one out with something, do it anyways, because it might just turn out right.
And I think that's really, really important. But do you know what I also believe? I believe it's time to
Don't know what, don't know. It's
go
nearly
to the
50 episodes. I
interview.
have no idea what we're talking about. Let's go to the interview. Hello, everyone. Today we have Alison Jones with us. Hello, Alison, and thank you for being with us.
Hello, Marcus. Great to be here.
Thank you. So, as usual, we start from the top. So, please tell our listeners who you are and why you wrote the book.
So, I'm Alison Jones. I'm a publisher. I'm director of Practical Inspiration Publishing. I'm also judge at I was going to say head judge. I've just stepped down as head judge, but as head judge at the Business Book Awards. and yeah, so I'm mostly a publisher, but I'm also a book coach. And yeah, that's what I do. I've been publishing all my life.
And why did you write this book?
I wrote, so many reasons. Partly credibility, because when you are publishing books and telling people what a great thing it is to publish a book, you kind of, you have to do that. Partly discoverability, because a book can make you discoverable on particularly Amazon, but generally when people are looking for experts, then having a book that's good for that. Partly for me, because it helped me clarify and articulate all the ideas that were going through my head. So yeah, a number of different reasons.
You had mentioned the word experts. I'm in the blockchain space. And
Right.
if you immediately want to be suspect, you tell somebody you're an expert in blockchain. Because I tell you, there are no such things as blockchain experts. They don't actually exist. But in that space, having a book is indeed a bit of a calling card. And it's a bit of a reveal as to what are your core principles and ideologies in the world of blockchain, because it's a very, very broad area. And I've thought about it. Of course, Marcus has written his own book, but it's like, is the book intended to be a revenue generator, or is the book intended to be a calling card, or is the book intended to be something else? Is one of the big questions. And it's kind of outside our typical leadership and teams business, but we'll come to those questions later. But what do you think of those different reasons, or are there other reasons?
I think if you are writing any book, but particularly a business book, as a revenue generator primarily, you're probably in for a nasty disappointment. They're low price, low margin objects. I think if you're looking for the return on investment in your business and what the book will make possible, and the fact that it codifies your intellectual property, which of course is a massive business asset, then you're probably onto something. And actually, interestingly, I mean, another reason I wrote the book, I guess, was just because it makes it easier to work with people. When people come to you having read the book, or if they come to you and you show them the book, there's an awful lot of stuff that you then don't have to talk about and waste time on, because it's all there. So there's that as well. So we'll read that chapter, and then we'll we'll take it from there, and it gets people to a particular place. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's a complete answer to the question, but I'd say that looking for the return on investment from direct sales of the book, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even though I think you have one example in a book where someone managed to really sell a book quite well and made 50 grand out of it or something. I think it's probably a rarer one. But so the one thing I want, and I want to not fully get angry on it, but it's really interesting because when we asked David Marquet why he wrote this book, and said because I'm angry. So
Yeah.
I'm not doing something similar, and I'm going to say so. We just been through nearly 50 books. So we're nearly at episode 50. We've done this for a year now, book a week. And before that, we've both been reading tons, and there's still piles and piles of there because there's just so many books around. At the same time, we found there's maybe 5 major themes in business books that sort of all agree on each other, which is okay because there's consensus at least, right? And everyone wants their own flavor, and that's totally fine. However, we also work in change and transformation in businesses. And what we found very often there is like, seemingly no one reads these books because no one implements any of it. And we're just there like, it's all out there, it's all there. Look at this, look at that. And some writers are really good at giving you really a step by step, others are very conceptual about it. But despite all of this, are the right people really reading the books? Is my
Yeah.
question.
It's a great question. I mean, some are. I talk to many leaders, business owners who have cheerfully said that they've got where they are or they've solved a particular problem by reading the right book. And so that does happen. And you say there are a lot of books out there, and there's a lot of everything out there. Do you know? It's like saying there's no point doing a podcast or a blog or a magazine article because there's lots out there. Well, of course, yes, there's lots out there, and you're never going to write the last word. You know, you're never going to obviate the need for another book in this topic. But having said that, if you can present something in a way that resonates with somebody, you can make somebody see something differently for the first time. I mean, often it's a dialogue, isn't it? When you're reading a book, it's where you're at and the point your understanding has reached, the point of the situation around you. You can read the same book twice and get two completely different things out of it. So I think that's important as well. And that explains, of course, why on Amazon you get people going, something absolutely useless, and other people going, oh, this is the thing that I needed that changed my business forever. Because it's that dialogue. And I don't think the fact that there are a lot of books out there means that there isn't space for your book. You just have to be contributing to the conversation, moving it on.
And so let's kind of pick up on that a bit. I am a product person, and a lot of what you talk about in the book is product 101. Who's the audience?
Yeah.
What's their pain point? How are you going to connect to them? How are you going to deliver value to them? Will they actually pay for this? Can you test market the product? It was like, oh, wait a minute. This is exactly what we do with kind of good product
It's product design.
discovery.
Yeah.
Product design, product discovery, you're doing a lot of the same things. So of course, a lot of that was kind of, touching me in the heart because like, yep, she gets this, I get this. We're looking at it in very much the same way. So how do you kind of blend that in? Because I think you did a bit of product, you did a bit of company because it's part of your company, and a bit of writing. What do we tell people out there who are leaders, who are entrepreneurs, who don't have the time to kind of even spend with friends, family, and kids that they would want to, but for some reason are crazy enough they decide they want to write a book? And yes, I'm pointing at him.
Yeah, that's working on my screen. I don't know about anybody else.
So I'm on the other side. I don't know.
Yeah, do you know, I think writing a book is, there's no magic bullet. There's no fast way well, maybe there is a fast way to do it. Writing a good book takes time. And I'd say that if you are a business owner, you have to kind of think about, how do I get a flywheel effect where the stuff that I already have to do can contribute to doing the book. So for me, I wrote my book as an outcome from podcast interviews, as blog posts, because if you're in business today, you're going to have to put stuff out there. You're going to have to be discoverable. You have to have your voice heard. And therefore, if you can sort of create the book, create a table of contents that allows you for that to become the engine of your content strategy over 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, however long it is, then actually it's less of an onerous additional thing you have to do. And it's simply an alignment where you're creating a book, but actually you're testing the ideas out. You're starting to own the space. You're getting engagement and building feedback, and then you get a kind of virtuous circle, a flywheel effect, where a lot of what you already have to do is contributing towards that book. And I would go further. I would say, actually, if your book isn't aligned with the stuff that you're putting out there, it isn't aligned with the workshops you're delivering, the training courses you're doing, all the stuff you have to do in the day job, maybe that's not the right book.
So what Marcus and I've been talking about, I'm going to hand over to you. Just hold your horses.
Thanks.
Is the next big idea for our consultancy, and then how do we weave that into our podcast, and how do we weave that into the next book, so it directly aligns with some of the conversations that we're having with regard to, okay, we've done the first 50, and no, we didn't give up. Too many people did 3 episodes of a podcast, they got no listeners, and they
Hot
just
fade.
stopped. So we just said, no, we're just going to keep going, and now we're building on the layers on top of that and dovetailing it in, right, Marcus?
Yeah, we don't care if we're not successful, right? We just keep going.
Wrong. We do care.
Passion.
Angry.
It's one of the emotions.
That's right.
But I think, I looked at the way I wrote the book, and it was like that. I had written a lot of articles, and I never thought I would be able to write a whole book, because that's 200 pages, whatnot, just the sheer volume of it. And can I actually spin a narrative across that? It was quite daunting. But at the same time, I think it's been simmering around for 10, 15 years to finally get out. And then I put it all together, and then I rewrote it twice over 2 years before it finally came out. But so I think, as you said, everyone has a different approach, and I think it's going to be interesting after episode 50, and it's not just my book; it's now 50 other ones. How do we do that? So, but apart from now that I'm finally rambling on, something you said earlier about whatever. Something you said earlier about maybe if it's not really kicking in and getting picked up, maybe it's the wrong book to write. So I was literally just doing some customer research around the project I'm working on at the moment, and we're talking about experiences and the value of experience. And then Joe Pine came up with The Experience Economy, which was written in 1999, and he only ended up 2 years ago to reissue it, and suddenly it really hit a chord. So back in the days, he was talking about the early days of Starbucks being able to sell a cup of coffee for £4 or whatever, and saying, look, there's value in doing something else out there. And at the time, it didn't quite kick in. And now a lot of industries are talking about the value of experience, not just product or service. So it was sort of right to write it, though, wasn't it? It just took 20 years. So what is it about writing a book for the big idea you have and still believing in it, even so it might not resonate at the moment you're writing it?
Yeah, it's a great question, because if it isn't landing with people, it's like the great product design. We're back there again, aren't we? If you've got a great product design and it's not landing with people, do you carry on and say, well, they'll catch up? Or do you say, the world's not ready for this yet? And I guess it depends where you are on your journey and the kind of dent you want to make in the universe. If you want to build a successful business fast, then frankly, you're going to have to, find something that's resonating and find your people. But if you are committed to being the person who breaks things, the person who is the first in, then that's the route you got to take, and you just got to hope that you landed it right. When you speak to visionary CEOs, it's really easy to construct a kind of backward-facing narrative about how they spotted the gaps in the market. We all know, most of us, most of the time, we're just guessing. We're just putting our chips down and hoping it works. I just think if you lock yourself away in a room and you write the big idea book and then you launch it on an unsuspecting world, the chances of you hitting the jackpot with that are minimal. If you start putting the stuff out there, if you start getting engagement, I mean, the other thing about writing a book, of course, is it's a great reason to reach out to people. It's a great excuse to say, oh, I'm writing a book on this. Can I talk to you? And you start building relationships, and that increases your luck surface area. But, when you see things resonating, when you see someone get what you're talking about, you see the metaphor that you're using, land, and you see them going, I'd never thought about it like that. That's when you're onto something. And it doesn't have to be everybody, but there has to be a group of early adopters who get what you're talking about. Otherwise, you are probably in for a world of pain. And 20 years from now, people might go, wow, you were really visionary, but they might not. And it's going to be a very lonely 20 years.
Yeah. I think my time is ticking somehow. but it's really great what you're saying, because literally that's how I had met Troy before, but he was working at the time at a startup, so I interviewed him for my book. And then he was
There
so
you go, you
kind
see.
to, after a couple of more wines, to write the foreword for it as well. So, but as you said as well, like, and we were lucky in one of our first episodes to have Tom Peters on, and he was just, like, I'm over 70, I don't care anymore. Here's what I learned, and here is how I phrase it.
Yeah.
And he said, if you're in a room with 100 people and 3 people get it, you had a good day.
Yeah.
And that was after 40 years of professional life, and it's like, okay. But I had a really great experience with the book as well. My book was all right, but like, there's a friend of mine, and she was like, oh, can I talk to you about your book? It's like, oh, you read it? Like, yes, I did. So, but I want to sit down with you and talk about it. It's like, okay, which is very unexpected for me. And she showed up with my book with full of notes, post-its, scribbles, and whatnot. And I nearly cried. It was just
Yeah,
someone
it's really
who had
moving, that, isn't it?
so engaged in it and used it and abused it and kind of really, made it her own. And like, and it was a great, and that alone, I would argue, was worth the time investing in it. And it's
It's such a privilege, isn't it, to be that engaged? So they spend hours and hours with your voice in their head. It really is phenomenal. When you see somebody who's really got it and it's really landed with them and they've engaged with it, it's really, as you say, it's very moving.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely connecting to people while you're writing as well. I know I had doubts or bouts where I was just writing, and then I just couldn't make up my mind, and this, and it starts to feel really lonely. And then the second you go and talk to someone about it, like, I'm writing, what's it about? Or this and this, and suddenly get so much energy back. It's
Yeah.
quite amazing. But as
Maybe
we're
that's
here, sorry, yeah.
I was going to say, maybe that's the thing that's different about product design. When you make a product, nobody really cares about you. But when you tell a story, when you write a book, you've got to find that balance between the empathy piece, between what you're doing for the reader and how you're presenting information in a way that they can use, but also putting something of yourself into it so that they trust you, they know you, they see where you're coming from. So there is something there about, but I always think it's such an exercise in kind of pride in one sense, in the sense of, standing up and saying, I've got something to say and I deserve to be heard, but also humility, because it's not really about me. So I think that's probably a difference in writing a book to pure product design.
Yeah.
It's your
E-
story.
Even so, I think there's probably few authors where the humility might not come in that much, but but it really, it's an oddly raw and telling thing to go, how do you put yourself out? Are you going to be very structured and neutral, or are you gonna actually bring yourself, how much you want to bring yourself in, how much you're going to open yourself up and make yourself vulnerable to some extent, because this is
Yeah.
hopefully, if it's not a purely commercial effort, which is true in my case, I'm quite passionate about my work, I'm putting myself out there with a lot of detail and for people to scrutinize it. So it's really interesting. I know Tro is waiting for a question. Should I? Yeah, go on then.
Very kind of you. Thank you.
I
So
am.
I wrote for City AM for 2 years, and City AM, the newspaper downtown,
Yeah.
back when it was in print, and now it's online. And for the first year, I wrote a practical, grounded, pragmatic assessment of the industry. And everything I said was well researched, and everything I said was accurate, and it was dull as dishwater, and nobody cared. And then I decided I was going to have big, bold opinions, and I was going to disagree with long-standing things, and suddenly it got a huge amount of energy into it. And over the last 6 years, it's really just become painfully obvious to me that critical thinking, rational logic, data driven is not what moves people. Whether it was Trump, whether it was Brexit, whether it's Bitcoin, these are emotionally driven events. Because if you look at the data, I never say facts, I never say truth, because facts require context and they require source, and truth requires context and source. But if you look at the data, like the data is pretty obvious, and yet the emotions throw everything up in the air. So when writing a business book, how much emotion, how much empathy do you put in, and how much dull, boring dishwater pragmatism? Connect A to B, connect B to C. Eventually, you'll make some money.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. And it's one of the reasons, slightly, I will answer that question, but on a side note, I think it's one of the reasons why we value books so much, because we live in this noisy world where people just have to shout louder and louder and say more and more outrageous things to be heard. There's something really profoundly good for the soul to just sit with a book and not be distracted and go deep into something. I think that's actually quite a subversive act these days when everybody's out to capture your attention with the next, outrageous headline. So that's one side thing. So I think actually if you shout too shrilly, you almost negate the USP of your book. I think it's got to be sustained, it's got to be reasoned and all the rest of it. I would say that because that's kind of the person I am and the kind of books that I like to publish. But I do think it has to have a hook. You have to have. I'm really sorry. The neighbour is revving his his motorbike outside. I really hope you can't hear that. But you have to have a hook that allows somebody to see something in a new way, and that has to be immediately graspable. So while the big story you're telling underneath it can be detailed and a labour of love and have some dished water in there if it must. There's no reason why factual writing has to be dull, but there is some stuff that you have to get across. I still think if you can't explain to somebody what this book is about and why it matters really quickly in a word picture that they get, and that framing, that storytelling is really vital, and it's not easy. And somebody like Trump was a master at it. Make America great again. I mean, that slogan, it's powerful. So finding a way to communicate that big central idea, that big central promise of the book. And I think if you've been a journalist, you've got a big advantage there. But the book itself has to deliver on that, and it can't just be a big series of sound bites.
Very
For
correct.
sure. Yeah, I think because there's a lot of, if I look back at all the titles, the one that are less, yeah, like descriptive on that. I'm just thinking back of some of the recent ones, like Be Less Zombie
Yeah.
and
Elvin Turner, yeah.
turn the ship
Turn the ship around,
around.
Mcconaughey, yeah.
They are just so they're calls to action, right?
Yeah,
That
exactly.
inspires so much, and
Yeah.
for a multiple set of reasons, they've done really well. Alvin's amazing at getting out there and engaging people with the book, and it's a great starting title, and it's a very comprehensive way of looking at innovation. And obviously, David Marquez is just, he lived through it, and
Yeah.
he's done that. The same with I think one of your publishers. So we had uh, the long win over as well.
Yes.
When
Kath
people have their
Bishop.
life stories on it and go,
Mm.
I went through it and I actually have a different opinion now. Like, look at it
Yeah.
the other way around. That is such a strong, compelling thing, that it's very striking, and it's amazing how some people are amazingly good at just with the title itself, which is
Yeah.
really impressive. However, one thing I wanted to ask, because you will probably be able to answer this better than most other people, is maybe potentially debunking a myth. So just the whole thing uh, around Warren Buffett reading also a book a week. And in particular, I'm curious about CEOs doing that. And you said before CEOs have read books and they changed their life. But is it true, or is it all nonsense? Because it feels obvious that those are the people who are so busy. They're the least likely ever reading a book, and what therefore might potentially even get a hook into their timetable to ever consider something like that. We're really lucky to get a few people in here who are that busy and give us half an hour. And do they are they able to spend 3-4 hours with a book? How
Um, I'm going to add to that. So Warren Buffett was a book a day, initially
was a
600
book
to
a
800
day?
words
That's
a
awesome.
day, now reads 500 words a day, is what it says kind of generally. But what I really loved was your fast reads and your fast read strategy. How do you kind of get through a book? Because every so often, my lovely co host, who's responsible for scheduling all of our lovely authors, puts 5 authors back to back, one after another. And suddenly it's not a book a week, which I can
We
kind of
never
manage
done
on
more
top of
than
my regular
four back to
clients.
back
Yeah, we did. We have done 4 interviews back to
in a
back
week once. Yeah.
twice. Twice. So anyway, how do you do fast reads, and does Warren Buffett really do it?
Well, I don't have a hotline to Warren Buffett. I don't know, but what I do know is he's made a real big thing out of it. So I
Yeah.
can't see why he would lie about that. So it's a kind of, he bangs on about it. I mean, Barack Obama, busiest man on the planet in office, surely, was putting out his reading list, and people. Again, I think it does come down to that intentional use of your time. I mean, if I took all the time I spend sort of mindlessly scrolling and actually applied it to proper reading, I'd probably get through a lot more than I do. I've seen in the book, of course, there's reading and there's reading. I've got rapid reading in the book and a way to kind of quickly absorb the key points of a book. But there's also rich reading where you almost engage in a kind of coaching conversation with the author. So, that when you say reading,
Mm.
it can be different things. I think there is evidence. I mean, you're right about data and facts and truth and all the rest of it, but there does seem to be evidence that CEOs, that successful high earning people tend to read more than average people. And then you've got to ask, well, is that causal correlation? But I think Warren Buffett's point that actually it's all out there. It comes back to what we were saying earlier. There's so much great stuff out there in books. And if you're not availing yourself of it, then you're kind of missing out on a really actually easily, cost effective competitive advantage when it comes to advancing your career and your leadership skills.
And so, moving on that point, exactly, very nicely set up. Thank you very much for that. Um, is writing a book a way that leaders can improve their internal communication skills, whether that's managing up towards the C suite or managing down to the teams that work beneath them? Because I think there's some really interesting parts that you were talking about, leadership and writing.
Yeah, I fully believe. I absolutely, stand by this. I think that writing a book is one of the most powerful things that you can do to clarify your own ideas, to be able to communicate them more effectively, to deepen your thinking, to challenge yourself, and also to do the kind of 360 around, well, how is this being received? And the empathy piece. This is what I think. This is what I've learned in my life. Is that just me? Does this hold true for other people? How does it play out in somebody without my privilege? So that I think all the skills that you develop from writing a book, if you really do it properly, if you take it seriously and test out those ideas, they cannot but help you communicate better, be a better leader, be a better human being.
It's definitely true because especially if you walk around, not just business as usual, but change and transformation, which is becoming more and more necessity based on wicked problems, ever changing landscape,
Yeah.
especially over the last it's now a year and a half. This shock that went through the whole thing.
And it
Um,
forces these things into your consciousness. There's so much that you're so busy doing life that you don't inquire about. And I think writing a book forces you into kind of self inquiry, but also situational inquiry as well. Why is this happening? What are the connections? And you look at the bigger picture, you extrapolate patterns, you test out hypotheses. All that has got to help you understand the world better and act better within it.
Absolutely, and I think writing a book or in a lot of work we do, writing a problem statement or mission
Yeah.
statement or any of these things, right? It's not just about being able to communicate. I think the interesting aspect, and that I think goes then straight into learning, right? So the
Yeah.
second, and we had, I think, on our, was this second episode, we're around a book about learning. And actually, learning happens more not when you do and you're actioning and you're doing your tasks. It's actually when you take a break, step back, look at what you've done, reflect on that, and you're
Mm.
basically starting, when you're reflecting as we do, we're starting to tell each other again on walk, and we
Yeah,
have an
it's
internal
cold, isn't it?
monologue.
It's
And
cold sort of cycle. It's
exactly,
absolutely, you have to be doing, or you haven't got anything to write about. But if you're not
exactly,
reflecting, then you aren't moving forward. You're just simply doing the same thing over and over again without thinking
And the
about it.
word they used was not just practice, but deliberate
Deliberate
practice.
practice and
yes, yes,
reflective
yes, 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 yes,
practice.
yes.
And I would go as far as say, even if you have no ambition to write a book, developing a writing practice is a great thing to do as a business leader. Even if it's just 5-6 minutes a day of
Yeah,
reflection, of inquiry, that in itself, and it also makes you a better writer, which is no bad thing today, because
yeah.
we have to write to be internally in an organization, but also externally getting our ideas out there. So developing proficiency in writing and articulating your ideas is a really key capability for business.
Absolutely, because one of the things I continuously discover in literally every organization, I don't think there's a single one where this doesn't happen at all, is where the people who work in the company are just not quite clear of what leadership really wants. The clarity
Yeah.
aspect is always missing. And they say, and I'm not just saying there has to be a full blown vision statement, but the fact that there's some kind of story or narrative that's communicated well enough. I think most organizations are massively struggling with that. And then, therefore, the trickle down effect is that people assume, people are confused, people don't know how to act based on insufficient information,
Mm.
and you're starting to have a really non-impactful, non-effective organization.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like it's really interesting to explore. I mean, and there's already a variety of formats in organizations like vision statement, problem, all these things that are part of that. So I think a lot of leaders would do really really well to hone that skill a bit more. And as we usually are, we have more questions than time, and so therefore here will be the last question. See, don't know, kind of giggly today. I have no idea why. Um, the there's so many books out there. Obviously, we discovered that. What does it then take if you read books and or you write books or whatever, or you engage with all the stories that are out there? How do you then tell the relevant ones from the non-relevant ones? How do you best go about this? How can I select the best books apart from listening to a podcast?
Well, funny you should say that. So, obviously, the Extraordinary Business Book Club podcast, which I host, is a really great way of discovering business books. And I
Yeah.
do kind of 3 hot new reads. And I also ask my guests to recommend a book that's really impacted them. So I get some great recommendations that way, which I that's my to read pile is to the sky, hence books to the sky is my handle. So ask people you admire, ask people that you see doing really good things in the world. What do you read? What books have really struck you? And there's no excuse for not having a look at things like Goodreads, at Amazon reviews. But I would say, as we said before, where you are in your life and the situation you're facing and where your thinking has got to, all of that will impact on what you get out of the books that you read. So I think there's no shame in not finishing a book. I have quite a few books on my bookshelf that I've started and gone, yeah, no, no, not now. Often I have come back to them and read them later. And I think there is something really helpful about having a print book there on your shelf that it catches
Yeah.
your eye. There's something really thingish about it that's really helpful just to have it there. But
Definitely.
try. You can sample. Look inside on Amazon. Look at the table of contents. Is it clear? Is it articulately put? Does it grab your attention? Sample it. You can send a sample to your Kindle. So sample and then find one that you think really speaks to where you're at, speaks to what you need right now, and give it a go. And the great thing, of course, is you can often reach out to authors on Twitter as well. So actually establishing a kind of relationship with them is a great thing that just we couldn't do 20 years ago. So that's cool.
I just had one more thought. What if this is me, We live in a very, very polarized society,
Yeah.
and trying to find common ground. The next time I meet somebody that I am the polar opposite of, socially, financially, whatever it is, I'm not going to try to debate the topic that we don't agree on, but I'm going to ask them, what's the last book that you read? Or what's the last good book you read? Because that might give me more insight into them than trying to find any other common ground. And I might find it in a neutral space of a book.
I think that's a really helpful thing because we are, as you say, increasingly polarized, increasingly mystified by how other people are holding these opinions, because we're becoming siloed so much more. So, yeah, maybe you're right. Although I suspect that someone might say, I don't read books, when, there's your answer.
Watch that YouTube channel, please.
Right. Okay. All right, Marcus, wrap us up.
Lovely. Alison, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all the stories and insights. And it was lovely to have you. Thank you so much.
It was really fun, guys. Love talking about books.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.